Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today we're talking the truth of Leman Russ. General spoiler warning to begin, as today we will be referencing events from across the Warhammer 40k universe. As always, I really recommend you read the stories for yourself first, without spoilers, as that's the best way to enjoy the lore for yourself. But with that said, let's just jump straight in. So last week, we had a discussion on the Primarchs who turned down the ruinous powers. And during the debate on Jagatai Khan, I referenced the particular comment from Magnus the Red, where he teases the Kargan and the Phoenicians' fate having been altered, which takes place during the Horus Heresy novel Scars. However, directly preceding this mention of Jagatai and Fulgrim, Magnus makes a rather highlighting claim about Russ, and it's something that's really reignited in my mind over the weekend. I'm glad you came to see me, Jagatai. We always saw eye to eye, you and me. You were brittle, but at least you spoke the truth, unlike that bastard Russ. Do you know what he is underneath? Do you have any idea what Leman Russ really hides inside those furs and totems? Here's a clue. His space wolves have to cover their every axe blade with runes, lest they scream their nightmares into the void. Is that natural? So, the truth of Leman Russ. It's quite a claim here, incredulous even, that the wolves use their runes to keep something in, something contained, rather than for protection without. That Russ has a darker nature than realised. So what is Magnus referencing here? What is he implying? Is it an over-the-top view of the curse of the Wolfen, or something more? I think the most logical answer here is most likely the Wolfen, the Mark of Russ. The beast within the space wolves that they must eternally fight and battle, harness the strength it brings, yet resist its overwhelming desire. We know this is a battle space wolf aspirants take on the moment they drink from the cup of the Wolfen, inheriting the Mark of Russ, and that such is the trial. Many fail immediately. The Wolves of Russ have generally done their best to hide the Wolfen over the centuries from wider view, very aware of just how their comrades would be viewed by the Inquisition. However, I certainly wouldn't say it's a psychological effect that dominates them, as much as say the Sons of Sanguinius, at least in the sense of weighing on them. It is simply a part of what being a space wolf is. However, back during the time of Russ, the time of the Legions, it was most definitely a secret that Russ did not want to become known to his brothers, as could be seen within Russ's Primarch novel, Leman Russ the Great Wolf, where he mentions his brother the Lion witnessing the Wolfen, the then believed cursed 13th. You won't hear their sagas when you come to the Long Table. That is another tale for another time, and you are too young for any of it, whelp. He turned to look at Haldor, his expression shrewd, half masked by the deep shadow. The Lion never spoke of it, Russ said. Never. He could have told the Imperium of our sickness, and made it worse for me. But even in his anger he said nothing. The Primarch mused on it. He could keep a secret. He saw our imperfection, and he suffered it to remain. And that was the heart of his nobility. In the end, then, he truly was better than us. The archetype of legions, the first of all. If I owe him anything, it was for that. You can see here, Russ viewed it as a sickness. The curse at that time still new, still unknown really, an undoubted secret. All the Primarchs lived in fear of some kind of flaw, heavily believed to be the reason for at least one of the lost Primarchs and Legions' eradication at least. We've seen the Thousand Sons struggle with their mutations. The Blood Angels hide their flaw, and so too the Sons of Russ. So in a sense you could understand Magnus referencing it this way. An incomparable psyker, he would easily be able to see within the Space Wolf's nature, the yearning, growling wolf within, and you'd be able to understand his bitterness. Not only is this technically a shard of Magnus speaking to Jagatai, meaning it's taking place after Russ's devastated Prospero and shattered Magnus's physical body, but Russ has always been seen as something of a hypocrite by Magnus too. His arguments against psykers, yet keeping his own, and bemoaning the flaws of Magnus's sons, while possessing his own. However, if this is Magnus referencing the Wolfen, we have to ask, is he being entirely truthful? Because that last line of his sounds very extreme. Here's a clue. His Space Wolves have to cover their every axe blade with runes, lest they scream their nightmares into the void. Screaming nightmares into the void. I guess perhaps a dramatic description of the wolf howl maybe, or a poetic sense of the animal within taking control. But the claim of the runes are to keep it within, not actually for warding protection from without. That's something incredibly different to the rune use and culture we know. So, does Magnus have a point with this? Has Russ passed down a far darker truth inside of him? Is Magnus revealing this unknown truth? Or is it merely a scorned and bitter brother voicing his hatred? Well, thankfully, we've actually received a glimpse of Russ learning of the truth inside him as well. And this came from my favourite heresy novel, Wolfsbane by Guy Haley. With Russ determined to fulfill his duty to his father, and in my opinion feeling no small amount of brotherly responsibility, he decided he had to face Horus one more time, even if it meant he would die in the encounter. To try and find a means and understanding of facing Horus, Russ first left Terra for Fenris to consult his world spirit, thus entering the underworld, aka sorcery and the warp. Russ conquered 4 trials to prove his worth to the Fenrisian god of death, whereupon he was granted to ask one question. The being to provide the answer is a Terran-looking Leman Russ, what Russ believes he would have been like had he not been taken during the scattering. The question he would ask is, how can the Emperor's spear, his spear, aid him against Horus Lupercal? And here he is told of the power the weapon contains, a portion of his father's own might, how the blade reveals the truth to whomever it strikes, and that if Russ can strike Horus, it will reveal the true Lupercal within once more. However, the most important part of this for today's discussion is that the Terran-looking Leman Russ strikes the true Leman with the spear, to reveal the full truth within. The false Russ yanked the spear free. Russ sank to his knees. Somehow, he lived, though one heart was dead, and the other beat unsurely. A gaping wound had been punched through his body, blood poured from his chest in red cataracts. This was not the worst of the Primarch's injuries. The most terrible wound had been cut into his soul, and the burning salt of knowledge rubbed into it. He knew what he was. He knew what all the Primarchs were. His face was numb, cold crushed his limbs. With wide eyes he looked up into the face of his killer, so familiar, yet so different. "What are we?" he said, though he knew full well, and his soul shriveled in the fires of revelation. How could our Father have brought us into this world? How could he have made us? So Leman Russ learnt the truth that lied within. Did he learn that he carried some unique darkness, as Magnus possibly suggested? Or did he simply learn the truth of the Primarch's creation, that the Emperor made them using the warp? For me, it's the latter, and the key is in a few particular lines. He knew what he was. He knew what all the Primarchs were. Of course, I could be wrong, but that really comes across to me like Russ is reflecting on them all as the same. That creation of them, the power the Emperor stole from the gods. How could our Father have brought us into this world? How could he have made us? Again, us. Russ isn't saying me, he's saying us. Reflecting on all the Primarchs equally, like they are all one in the same, which I think they are. There's no unique mystery or darkness about Russ, like Magnus's quote might imply. He was created exactly the same as each of his brothers, using the warp to give them godlike powers, to each have their own traits according to the Emperor's designed role. The truth is, for Leman, like his brother Sanguinius, he and his legion were made with a unique divergence, an intended flaw as it's become known. For the sons of Sanguinius, it was to give them an unbridled advantage in battle, a savagery. For the sons of Russ, the ferocity of the wolf, and dare I say, the loyalty. I have long viewed Russ and the Space Wolves as the security force amongst the legions. Their culture, the counter to betrayal. Their runes, the counter to psychic assault and sorcery. I don't see any darkness within Russ that his brothers don't share. And I think if there was one, I think it would have become clear when Russ learned the truth himself. Magnus, the Shard of Magnus, is most likely referring to the curse of the Wolfen inside Russ and his sons. Yet we have seen far too much evidence of the current day Space Wolves, some 10,000 years later, to really disprove his claims of the runes being to contain the darkness within. The Ragnar Blackmane series perhaps the best example, where we got a real in-depth glimpse of the Space Wolf indoctrination and nature of the Mark of Russ, the contest with the wolf within. It's not about runes to harness the beast. The Space Wolf aspirants have no such thing. It's about conquering it yourself, with your spirit, your courage, your strength. It's a fundamental aspect that this Magnus fails to understand, and in truth, is himself acting out of his own inner conflict as well. A broken shard of the once proud and loyal Magnus, now a lost and broken man, literally and figuratively. Something that wouldn't come to a conclusion until his reunion with his father. But as for that hatred of his brother Russ, well, that's a wound that will never heal. And it's a long-destined rematch that we will surely one day get to see. But as always everyone, what do you think? When it comes to this teased truth inside of Russ, is the Shard of Magnus referencing the Wolfen, or is he speaking of something else entirely? What do you feel about his claims the runes are used to keep that darkness within? Is this Magnus speaking out of the pain of Prospero, as you'd expect? Or through some form of misunderstanding? Or is he in actual fact speaking the truth? Like me, do you feel we've seen enough of the nature of the Mark of Russ and the Curse of the Wolfen to know the runes are not used for this purpose? Or do you feel that perhaps this culture has evolved within the Wolves since the days of the Legion? That maybe the current day chapter has a greater grasp and understanding of just what the Curse of the Wolfen is than their predecessors in the Legion. That perhaps the runes back then were used for this very specific purpose. As always everyone, leave your thoughts in the comments below. Huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. With that said, I am off, and I'll see you all again real soon.